you all for coming to our first legislative meeting. I will call this meeting to order. The time is now 4:05 on my watch. So good afternoon. I will start a roll call for attendance. We have myself here, Corey Betts, Andrea Comer, Greg Davis is present. We have Avery Gaddis. Is Daniel here? No, Daniel Kortowitz isn't here. And we have Shirley Sky Surgeon. So thank you all for joining this first meeting. We have our ED, Brandon McGee here, and also Christine Diamond. So we'll start. I'll pass it off to ED McGee to give us an update on legislative issues which we're working with.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you all to our counselors. Just by way of introductions, I'll just kind of ping around our staff and you all just give us your name and your title and then just call on the next staffer. Christina Diamond.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christina. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Social Equity Council. Caesar.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Strategic Program and Client Success Manager for the Social Equity Council. Madi.
Good afternoon, Madi Collazo Cruz. I'm the Legal Director for Social Equity Council. Georgette.
Georgette Cicero, Administrative Assistant to the Social Equity Council.
Awesome. And we've already introduced our council members of whom we are extremely appreciative of, especially throughout the legislative process. As you all know, we meet quarterly. So it feels like it's been a minute, but many of our counselors serve on other committees. So good to see you all again. On today, as you all know, we are in the thick of the legislative 2025 legislative cycle. So the Social Equity Council, alongside our counselors, or council members, we've been extremely busy presenting before the legislature, meeting with the Black and Puerto Rican Legislative Caucus, not limited to, discussing budget bill with our governor, among other leaders. I will not go through all of my notes. However, I will allow Christina Diamond, who also serves as our legislative point person, to just give us some updates on two extremely critical bills that the Social Equity Council continues to monitor and provide feedback, one of which is our agency's bill. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Christina, give an update, and then yield the floor to you, Mr. Chair, to entertain discussion. Christina?
Yes, thank you. So the Social Equity Council's state agency bill is House Bill 6930, and it was passed favorably out of committee, the General Law Committee, last week. And there are four main components to the bill, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with that. Would you like me to
Yes.
go over? Okay, I will do
Yes.
so. Okay, so the four main components, one of the first component is related to the social equity plans, and it requires all cannabis establishments to maintain a social equity plan throughout the duration of the business, and requires them to submit an annual report on the impact of their social equity plan in the DIA. We also have a provision in there that clarifies that if there is a sale or a change in ownership and control of a cannabis license to a non-social equity applicant, that cannabis establishment will no longer have social equity status and will no longer qualify for our programs. So for example, the loan program, they would be ineligible to apply. And then in terms of our loan program, we have put a provision in there to establish a 120-day application timeframe for the loan program to ensure that the applications will be processed in a timely manner. And then our fourth component has to deal, addresses some of like council specific organizational structure issues. And we're requiring the council to adopt a strategic plan, which we already have, and then an ethical code of conduct. And as well as mandating the council to receive ethics training focused on disproportionately impacted areas in the cannabis industry. So those last two components, they came from the recommendations from the comptroller's report. So we did include those provisions in our agency bill. Are there any questions on that bill? And we seem to have broad support on that. Like Brandon said, we've talked to the BPRC on this bill, and we've actually asked them to sign on as co-sponsors. So hopefully some of them will be doing that in the coming days. And then the next bill, one of our priority bills is House Bill 7181. And this is one of the General Law Committee's cannabis bills. And it did pass favorably out of the committee with substitute language the beginning of this week. And this bill, we actually have several concerns, and Brandon testified in opposition to the bill. And I sent all of you earlier today a copy of our testimony. So just highlighting a couple of the pieces in the testimony. So one of the first issues or components of the bill that we have concerns with is that it allows the social equity cultivators who have a provisional license to enter into an agreement with hemp farmers for the use of their cultivation lots. And these lots can be located outside of a DIA. And I don't know if you may remember from last session, they had the same bill that came out, and actually the legislature had passed legislation to establish a task force to study the impact of allowing the DIA cultivators to enter into business agreements with the hemp farmers. And that task force never met. So we're advocating for a thorough study of, by this legislative task force on this issue before we move forward and make any changes to the legislation. So that's one piece of the bill. Another component of the bill, which this language was not included in the original bill, so you won't see us addressing it in our testimony, but it was included in the substitute language, is in regards to equity joint ventures. So currently, equity joint venture owners are not allowed to change ownership for 7 years, with the exception of death or incapacity. So this proposed language would allow backers to buy out social equity applicants in 3 years. And it also, the legislation states that the council would have to approve that change of ownership. So we have several concerns with the language. First of all, just the Social Equity Council having to actually approve that change in ownership, and they don't have any criteria or guidelines listed. And so we would need to have to draft regulations to address that. So that's one of our first concerns.
And if I may, Christina, if you give you a second to breathe, thanks. On the 7 to 3 year adjustment, we're having a lot of internal conversation with our team, our staff, also with Chair Betts, and other stakeholders, right? Our biggest, not argument, but our stance is that we want to deepen conversation so that we are well informed and not moving in haste. And so depending on, who you talk to, meaning social equity individuals, entrepreneurs, you really get different arguments, if you would. And we've not made any decision, but we all know as part of the legislative process, you have to testify either in support or in opposition, and it will lend itself to further conversation. And so now we are in the thick of those conversations with the chairpersons of the General Law Committee, and that all the information that we receive, we'll be sure to share with the council before committing or making any decisions on behalf of the Social Equity Council. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. This is a public meeting. We've not made any decisions. I know that there are some social equity entrepreneurs who feel like we should just arbitrarily just move it to 3 years and call it a day. But that is not where we are at the moment.
Mhm. Yes. And then one of the last issues that we had testified in opposition to, in the original bill language, it allowed DIA cultivators to locate their cultivation facility in any location within a 5-mile radius of a DIA. And so we did testify in opposition to that. I don't know if you remember last session, the legislature had enacted legislation to expand the allowance of cultivator facilities to be located on state recognized tribes, reservations, or lands, or for exclusively outdoor grow facilities and municipalities that have a DIA. And we did support that expansion. And we do have concerns with this 5-mile radius issue. Are there any questions on that?
For you, Mr.
Thank
Chair, I think Councilor Gaddis has his hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Councilman Gaddis. You have
To you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the indulgence. Usually in the past, when there's legislative items to be considered by the legislature, we usually get some sort of tip or heads up or some sort of summary what's coming down the line before it's JF or JFS out of the committee. And I turned 50 March 5th, and I told myself the next 50 years I'm going to be real smooth and chill, more poodle than pit bull. So I'm going to just tell you though, I'm a little concerned that we're finding out about all this stuff now, and I think some of this stuff isn't good. I think some of this stuff isn't good. I wish I would have, and it's partly my responsibility too, because I could have peeked under the hood at the legislature while I was still there, and but sometimes I think we get over reliant maybe on staff to keep us abreast of these situations in real time, so that I could get on the phone with my legislative friends and say, hey, what are you guys doing? Sort of like in my Cat Williams voice, hey, wait a minute, stop. But I hope moving forward, we know about these things sooner. So maybe we could parachute into the discussion before it's too late. I'm not saying it's too late now, but some of this stuff I'm just learning about. And that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. But I think you all are doing a good job, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gaddis. And I think the question would be to you, Executive Director and Christine, how could we bridge that gap to making sure that the council is more aware of what's going on prior to these things going into committee?
Yeah, a great question. I'll respond, but through you, I think Madam Chair has her hand raised, Comer, and I'll respond. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry about that, Madam Chair, Comer. I want to make sure that we have her here as recorded in the meeting. So you have the floor, madam.
Thank you. And no worries. And apologize for being late. Had a meeting that ran over. So first, I wanted to say happy belated birthday to Councilman Gaddis. And I also, I'll speak from sort of the roles that I've had in the state or where agencies that I've been in, where from a legislative perspective, we got sort of a list of bills and sort of were able to track through our staffer sort of what the status was when they went into a certain committee and like what the status was over time. I think in this iteration, because we meet monthly and actually our committees meet quarterly, there's that consideration. Also want to just name that I know that the team, the SEC team is still, I will say, coming together, right? And I know that that Georgette and Christina and Madi and Cesar have taken on a significant amount of the heavy lifting, right? In terms of the work that we have to do, particularly as it relates to the strategic plan. So I say all that just to say that, and I think you said this, Councilman Gaddis acknowledged that we're doing a good job, but also, once things sort of level and we've gotten to the point where we've dealt with things as priorities, that maybe we'll be able to standardize some of these processes so that we are better able to know in real time what the status of legislation is. Thanks. Sorry for rambling.
No, and I'll just respond as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a great observation, and it's one that we could, in short order, because we do have a tracker, we do have a description of all of our bills. I think one of the things that I was trying to do was aligning how we operate within our committees and making sure information goes through our committee. We know that the Legislative Committee is one of our newer committees with our legislative chairperson. And so we can start that almost like tomorrow, right? And making sure we're providing these updates. It doesn't address your initial concern, Councilor Gaddis, in terms of just being aware of all the moving pieces throughout this process. But we can definitely incorporate sharing with this body and FYIing for the larger council where we are, and do damage control, because every day is something new and it changes and we have to, reset the conversation. But to your point, yes, we can definitely do that so that everybody is aware of what's going on.
Thank you. Mr. Gaddis.
Thank you for the second time. I also want to register my concern that I personally, I'm a little uneasy about picking winners or losers. So if someone wants to get out of their contract, it's 3-7 years, I don't know if I want the responsibility to say, okay, we approve you being able to dissolve and get bought out, or whatever the process or mechanism is. I'm a little concerned about that. And I'm also a little concerned about the asymmetrical nature of some of the council members' understanding of the law, contract law, understanding the paperwork in the granular fashion to be able to really make a very thoughtful, careful decision. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have all that paperwork and the capacity to do that. And I think we need to be very careful with putting it on the council to say, okay, you could get bought out, you can't get bought out. I think we really need to think about that thoughtfully. Now, if the conclusion is the best course for the council to make that decision, I'm going to be the first one to be a company man and go forward with you guys. But I just want to caution us about the implications of that.
And to your point, we really want to slow this down so that we can understand the full picture, right? And not move in haste. Whether it's let's just move to 3 years, or the council, we're responsible for determining who can buy out, who can leave, whatever. So I agree with you. I cannot confidently today tell you where we stand, which is why we're meeting with our stakeholders, the council, to better ascertain which direction should we go. But also keeping in mind, we want to protect and be able to advocate on behalf of our social equity individuals and not have them be in this situation where they don't know what they don't know.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you. Um, I guess so for me, it's kind of a philosophical question, right? Yes, on one hand, we are responsible for supporting our social equity entrepreneurs. On the other hand, we are responsible for ensuring that the communities that were most impacted by the war on drugs are affirmed and reinvested in. And in my mind, part of the reason for the extended period for these contracts was to ensure that was in furtherance of the latter, but also to protect the former, right? So to make sure that our social equity entrepreneurs were not being preyed upon or used just for the purpose of creating uh, this joint venture or this partnership, and then they would find themselves at a disadvantage at the end. I don't know what the answer is, right? Because I know that there are some social equity entrepreneurs who want to be released in 3 years and be able to take their profit and go be great. But I don't know ultimately if that is that why we're here? And I don't have the answer, but I just throw that out for consideration.
Anything else? Floor is open. So I guess we'll go from good to the good of the order. Avery, this is your favorite part of all meetings, I hope.
Well,
But I just
I'm
want to
sorry.
remind that the next.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. And a lot of this will require some individual outreach, just to kind of glean from each of you all on this issue. We are in the thick of the ledge cycle, and there is a lot of questions that we have to grapple with in short order. Whether we fight to keep things as it is until we figure it out, or we make a decision. I'm just wondering, from council's perspective, is there anything else that we can do to provide, I guess, more clarity on internal challenges that might present itself under either option? That is moving from 7 to 3 or 7 to 5, or council being the approver, if you would. I don't know, all of the different scenarios. Maybe we should map that out and then present that to you all in short order so that we can have more of an in-depth conversation on this. That would be helpful. But Madi, I know you mentioned something earlier with the change could potentially allow for a market without social equity individuals, negating the impact of the social equity lottery. So I don't know if you kind of want to unpack that just a smidget, because I know the time is of the essence, but I just think it's an important point.
Sure. So I think, my understanding anyway, by way of background, when the legislation was passed to allow adult use, DCP divided the licenses in two lotteries, right? The general lottery and then the social equity lottery. And it was a 50-50 sort of divide. And the intent was, right, to allow social equity individuals to be able to partake in this market. So, while I wasn't here when the 7-year period was established, my understanding, to Chairwoman's point, was that we wanted to ensure they were able to remain in the industry for a sufficient amount of time where they could establish themselves, have the guidance of these backers. A lot of them are multi-state operators that bring knowledge and capital into these equity joint ventures. So if we say, to your point, some folks want it to just be no time period, not even the 3-year period, right? So if we were to reduce this, let's say to a 3-year period, we'd in essence be negating the effect of the lottery because the social equity applicants would be bought out by these backers. I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily impossible for a social equity applicant to buy out their backers, but realistically speaking, right, that's why they have these backers, because they don't have that capital. So I think that if we were to reduce that 7-year period, then we'd have to ask ourselves whether we should have just gone with the general lottery instead of the social equity lottery, because these folks and some of our social equity individuals have said, we will not see, based on our agreements and the capital that has been injected into our businesses, we will not see any profit that benefits us individually as the social equity applicant until year 3 or later. So I'm just bringing that up in terms of, we really have to consider what that'll do to the market and to our social equity individuals, and, really displacing them and not having them in the industry. And we don't know when another lottery will happen at this point, because the industry is sort of still defining itself. We don't know what the particular licenses that will be up in the next lottery. We know they're not going to be all of them, right? So I think there will be even lesser room for our social equity individuals to come and partake in this industry.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And thank you, Marty, for all that context. It almost makes me feel like, well, a couple of things. One, it would be great if we had like a decision tree, right?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yes.
If this, then this, then this, then this. But
And we can work on that, Madam Chair, just kind of processing, because it'll help us to think through in real time. That's
yeah.
sort of how we operate anyway.
But then the other thing is, I wonder, because I know there are other states that crafted or carved out certain license types specifically for
Yes.
social equity applicants. And if we are going to reduce, if it lands that it will be reduced, couldn't we also then, request that there be a certain carve out for licenses for social equity applicants, so that we're ensuring that there is a space for them, right? Whether it's those who just wanted to get in and have their partnership and get their 5 pieces of silver and then walk away, or are there folks who really want to be able to participate in this business? So I don't know. I'm thinking about all of the different considerations that we need to be thinking about as we lean in terms of the decision. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Marty, I'm sorry, I see you. You have the floor.
You're on mute.
You're on mute. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one more thing. Brandon, thank you for, offering to come up with this decision tree. But I'm thinking here as I'm listening to you all speak regarding, the carve out for certain license types. And I think that if we're going to lean in towards that direction, we also need to consider our ownership and control requirements, because currently it's a minimum of 50% for the social equity applicant. And when you have that 50-50 divide, you create the perfect situation for a deadlock where one person might want something and the other one doesn't. And there's a deadlock because no one has a majority. Which is what some of these SEIs are saying. I only have 50%, they have 50%, I want something, they want something different. We're at a standstill, right? So I think anyone who's in that situation would want out. I mean, it's a terrible situation to be in when you're supposed to be in control of your business, but you're really not. So I think that if we want to do that, we also have to consider other policy changes moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Guess our next meeting would be June 25th, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's the
Yep,
date.
June 25th, but we'll be sure to provide updates on a regular basis, almost weekly, since we're in the thick of the ledge session.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And, so I guess I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this.
So move,
Meeting.
Mr. Chairman. Good meeting, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you.
I had one more question. He closed us out. But Councilman Gaddis, would we have to can we call special meetings, or is that we have to vote to make that happen, or we can just through the
No, you
chair?
can call a special meeting as long as it meets the statutory time requirement and all that good stuff. You don't need us. So if you have to have a
even
special
for a
meeting.
subcommittee, even for these committee meetings, because I'm
Yes.
thinking at some point we're gonna have to call a special meeting and not wait until June.
And your dynamite attorney could walk you through that as well, but you don't
That-
need
that
us.
part.
You just, as long as you meet those thresholds for the notices and all that good stuff.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have to make
Mr. Chairman, I
another
move to
motion?
adjourn. Mr.
Second.
Chairman,
All in favor?
Second.
see you
Aye.
guys later.
Yeah,
Thank you,
have a good one.
Christina.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Have a
Thank you,
good one. Thank
Christina.
you.